Hi, this is your Bhartia and welcome to your Let's Talk. Today we have with us JM Erlendson, Global Evangelist at Software AG. GM, it's good to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to host you here today. Before we kind of go deeper into today's topics, I would love to know just a bit about Software AG. What do you folks do so that our viewers, they have some, and if I'm not wrong, this is the first time I'm talking to you, so some background will help our viewers.
So Software AG is a German-based technology company, more than 50 years old. We've been making software. You might know us from Adabas Natural, which is a much more of a legacy database mainframe system. You also know a couple of other products like Web Methods along the way. But what I come from, the legacy and the part of the unit that I work with is Eris, our business transformation platform. And I've been working with that organization for more than 15 years now. So it's been a long road of working with that technology as it evolved. If you know business process management, enterprise architecture, process mining, those are the sort of focuses of what I work on.
And as your title says, Global Evangelist, and the company has been around for, as you mentioned, a long time, but the world around us has changed a lot. We now kind of live in a cloud-focused, cloud-centric world. I mean, of course, public cloud is there, private cloud is there. You can have cloud in your own, data center. Cloud native can be a way how you do things versus a place. We also talk about edge a lot these days, and edge can once again mean a lot of different things. We talk a lot about Gen AI these days. So when I look at a global evangelist at Software AG, who I'm looking at, what is your role, and how do you see this changed world around you?
The idea is, from an evangelist perspective, to be a technology communicator, a practice communicator. I feel like a lot of times you get into the weeds of technology really quickly about functionality, specific capabilities, integrations, the way that the piping works. And really the divide between business and IT we see growing. And that can only be solved through communication. So what evangelists do, like me, is we bring that information to the fore. We talk about what are capabilities we need, how does that translate to requirements, how does technology solve that, and how do they work hand in hand to be able to deliver services to customer. That's a hard challenge to manage, and evangelists like me are the ones who build and maintain that bridge, along with the technology we support, to ensure smooth business operations, to manage the chaos, which I think is what we're talking about today.
I also want to talk about the recent Reality Check 2024 survey. Talk a bit about, is it a recurring survey? Was it done the first time? If it is recurring, then of course we'll talk about some of the new findings, but if you can also draw a comparison with the last years.
We do a frequent check-in with our customers and with the industry to try and understand. So reality checks are periodic. And the reason why we do that is we want to understand the evolution of the marketplace. How do people see the technology challenges, the challenges that are coming from geopolitical situations, the issues with supply chain, the war for talent, new technologies like Gen AI. We want to understand how those are affecting our customers directly, not only so we can better provide solutions and products to them, but also so we can see the sort of topology of the landscape. And that's really important to us. When we take a look at this check, we've seen a pretty significant growth in some of areas we're concerned with. A good example is we're concerned with the ability to communicate effectively your business goals through the technology you use. So once again, I spoke about the divide between business and IT. The people feel like that divide is growing. And in fact, there's a lot of redundancy issues. We see people calling more and more than half of the folks we surveyed talked about how they have redundancy in their integration platforms. Now, these numbers are growing over time. The amount of technical debt, the amount of new products being invested in, but not necessarily supported by an organizational backbone or process and particular best practices shared across the organization. We see the chaos getting worse. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. We're going to touch upon that today. But when we look back at how we've assessed the marketplace, it is getting more complicated and there are more challenges. And the ways in which organizations address it sometimes are getting hogtied by their own financial realities.
What is the leading cause of this complexity? And I'm not just talking about the cloud native or Kubernetes complexity. If you are looking at, in general, things are getting more complicated. Why? Because the whole promise of cloud was to make things easier. All you have to care about is credit card bills, and that's it.
Well, theoretically, that was the idea, right? But it's a maze of intersecting and often loosely connected systems and processes that are being put upon with external forces and with the ever-growing pressure for technology evolution. So let's talk about this maze and the external forces. I think one of the big challenges that is causing pressure on the system has been the global pandemic. That was a big part of things. So changing to our new hybrid culture, a new way of working, service delivery models changed, the way customers expected to buy changed, and the ways that all of the folks who worked in your organization had to evolve very quickly. Now, that presented tremendous opportunities for new service delivery models, new ways of engaging with customers, new hybrid deliveries, but it also drove people into new process and technology maybe faster than they were necessarily prepared to do. So the external forces like that, external forces like I spoke about, the global supply chain challenges, forcing companies to find different ways of moving goods, forcing companies to operate with less localized distribution centers to address challenges with good process in a way that they haven't necessarily had to have the discipline because of the ease of some operations in the past. Those external factors coupled with the pressure for evolution, the pressure for technology demand, that demand has been increasing, particularly with the introduction, and of course, we say it all the time, of Gen AI. So Gen AI as a technology has accelerated what people have been taking from digital transformation into a whole new gear. We've shifted gears, and this Gen AI has taken a huge toll on the teams and the organizations that look into it. So obviously you can't be left behind. There's some great quotes that we have in our reality check article. I'd love for all of your listeners to look into on softwareag.com. But there is a lot of thought on you can't be left behind. It would be a huge cost to be a fast follower of Gen AI. However, there's a huge amount of talent demand on Gen AI. So the skills required to train models, develop Gen AI programming, be able to integrate that programming with your existing operations and be able to operationalize that new system, as well as back-end systems. So the integration has been a massive challenge, the chaos of connectivity that has emerged as a result of Gen AI. That includes other things like risks from data sovereignty issues, risks from AI ethics that have come up. These pressures of technology evolution plus the pressures of external forces upon organizations have really done a number to increase that complexity, to pressure them to change, and perhaps pressure them to change earlier than they were prepared to. All of that couples with the war for talent. It's been a huge factor, as well as the ongoing reality of layoffs. You see layoffs all the time from major technology companies. They're shedding resources while still trying to retain their best in an incredibly competitive marketplace. The people who drive operational excellence, so people who really understand business process management, integration, who understand how all of that ties in with new emerging technologies, can pair strategy with technology capabilities, who can operationalize, implement these new systems and best practices, can spread them, gain buy-in and acceptance, and be able to actually receive and then track back the value and, of course, monitor compliance along the way. Those resources are really scarce, and organizations often find themselves short-staffed. AI is fantastic for a lot of things. What it can't replace right now is AI knowledge workers, because those folks are the ones driving forward the models you'll need to eventually be able to drive the operational efficiencies you're looking to achieve.
Earlier, you were also talking about chaos. Can you talk about within organizations, what kind of chaoses are there? Also, a couple of years ago, we started talking about the whole concept of chaos engineering, but is this different from that concept? I just want to understand, when we talk about chaos of operations, how different is it from that whole chaos engineering concept? And you also talk about three kinds of chaos. So I also want to know about the chaoses that are there.
I would say that it's a little bit different in a few different ways. One thing I'll say is we classify chaos into sort of three buckets. Chaos being the word that's supposed to make you feel something is off, that there is an unsettled, an unstable operational reality that you are living with that really could use your attention. So I talk about chaos of operations a lot, and that talks to processes, business processes, and the ability for business processes to be operationalized in technical capabilities. Now, there is also IT chaos and chaos of integration. So let's take a look at and sort of knock out the last two first before I go to the one that I really focus on a lot. So IT chaos, you have an ever-growing tech stack. This tech stack is as a result of a lot of legacy applications that are required to be maintained, and people continue to think that these applications are, because they're the backbone of the organization, digital transformation is hard for them. They may result in a very risky digital transformation, may result in business operations interruption, which is a huge cost. In fact, there's a lot of people who've said, they said that 89% of the companies we surveyed said that they did experience a business operation because of their technical stack. That's a huge problem. And 40% said it was frequent. That is a pretty significant issue in terms of operations. So IT chaos is this growing legacy of applications that are all sometimes creating redundant functions, sometimes are an outdated technology that introduce things like security vulnerabilities, that this is also harder and harder to manage. It's a huge ecosystem that is complex and risk-laden. On top of that is integration, chaos of integration or interconnectivity. This is when all these applications themselves, it's exponential how much they work with each other to interchange data as part of an end-to-end process flow. And the more you introduce, the more levels of exponential complexity you introduce in interconnectivity. So what you're looking at is you're looking at an essentially unmanaged or very lightly managed ecosystem of data interchange that is driven by usually often individual business unit needs, individual practitioners rather than a collective organizational strategy. This shadow IT that crops up with little point-to-point integrations by business unit that ends up being both redundant as well as highly risky, and you're not exploiting the value of best practices shared across people, common sets of data, and evidence you can use to drive operational efficiencies elsewhere. This chaos of connectivity is one of those key things we see that has a lot of opportunity if you have a centralized management integration platform, something you can have as a service. What I deal with most is the chaos of operations. So there's a few different things along this. Let's provide the context of this so you can understand what we're looking at. So we see organizations have a significant amount of increased risk on their operations. There are lots of new regulations that are coming out and lots of new realities that they're having to face. I'll give you a good example. Operational resilience is a huge factor for organizations now. Some of them are being put on with things like CPS 230 in Australia, or DORA in the EU, or the sound practices for financial institutions in the United States. These are new regulatory obligations that require a huge amount of understanding of process, visibility into process and process execution. We think about this as evidence-based transformation or evidence-based decision-making. You need to show that you are making evidence-based decision-making. You need to be able to track all of your processes across the various systems that they go through, and that includes the integrations between those systems. Those are also causing a huge amount of increased costs. This is a lot of risk to the organization about a financial burden for them to operate. They need to find new routes to avoid dangers of disruption. This is a huge problem, and this is causing a difficulty in business operation. We found that 80% of the companies that we surveyed found operational chaos, found issues associated with operating in this new ecosystem, from decision-making to information gathering to just delivering service to customer. That's a big part, operational chaos. A second is operational visibility. So operational chaos comes from the lack of ability to see the whole picture. When we take a look at connected processes in an end-to-end chain, you need to be able to see at every point in time where things are in your operational reality and where issues are coming from, not just seeing the end point of an issue, but the root cause of an issue. Things are often blurry, cloudy, difficult to see. Processes being created without proper governance or standardization that leaves them hard to manage. In fact, oftentimes unmanaged. They're delivering a specific service and then sort of left to fire and forget. Those are big avenues for risks creeping in, and often uncontrolled risk. This is something that comes up partially because people want to do the right thing. They just want to be able to deliver business services, but partially because oftentimes IT is seen as a barrier. The governance becomes a conversation and a conflict. You have people who are not talking to each other. The growing divide between business and IT, 44% of the businesses we survey said that they're seeing more and more conflict between business and IT since our last survey. So every time you see out of scope activities, adding new technologies and new processes, you need to govern and integrate them with the rest of your organization. And without that governance, you can't see it. You have a blurred vision into your operations. And as a result, you can't control it. Now, control feels like a big word, but it really is the function to agility. We talk about control as in having a joystick that lets you move effectively through the space of your business operations. But without that, you're adrift. And when you have control, visibility, and ultimately strategy to aim towards, you can achieve your operational needs or excel and in fact beat the market as you are agile and able to address new customer concerns. So that operational chaos is not having that visibility, not having that control, and living in this wild west of business unit driven requirements and business unit driven implementations. This idea that business processes can be in silos and work independently it feels like a nice sort of satisfier of the soul. It's like, oh my goodness, I can just do whatever I want and technology will fill in behind me. But it is, in a lot of cases, a false promise. It's a candy. It goes in your mouth and it dissolves quickly and the taste is gone and it's not very good for you because ultimately it's not going to last. These are small projects that lead to significant, very short-term gains and then significant long-term risk. And so collecting these together is what organizations need more and more to do, and they're being pressured kind of in the opposite direction. IT leaders focusing on new technologies rather than tried and true sound business practices through the lens of new technology. I've heard from multiple clients, hey, tell me what AI can do for us. And my first question back to them is, well, what do you want to do? And they say, well, we want to use AI. And I said, well, AI is not an endpoint. AI is facilitating you to get to your organizational endpoint. But if all you do is talk about the technology, you're missing the purpose of your business, which is delivering service to customers. So let's talk about what AI can facilitate in your business capability structure. But without those kinds of conversations, teams are left to do whatever they feel is right, and in ways that they satisfy that their executives' mandates or directives, but rather than actually focusing on business outcomes that they can and sound business practices that they can rely on. I do want to hit on another two more points. First point is what's another external pressure for the chaos of operations that exacerbates the problem. And I don't want to blame the customer because the customer is always right, but the customer is often a problem. These customer expectations drive forward huge moves in technology without proper process to back it up. And, it's great to listen to customer feedback to get this idea of customers driving forward what you need. But, these slow and unresponsive systems you have to develop as a result of that, these unconnected, this lack of strategy in system development and capability development and process execution ends up harming the customer. We see customer feedback scores from a lot of the people I work with. I have one of my big financial institution customers that I talk to has really, really tight integration with their feedback surveys from customers. So they get the net promoter score for how people are seeing the technology delivered, as well as feedbacks and requests and these sorts of things. We're seeing that their net promoter score continues to decrease year over year as they deliver new services to customers. Now, these are services these customers have requested. Why would the net promoter score be going down? Well, the answer is they kind of did what people asked without thinking whether they should. The idea, we thought so much about whether what we could, we didn't think about whether or not we should. And the answer is you should if it fits into your delivery strategy for your services and capabilities. But responding to customer requests with technology because somebody saw it, the AI, once again, is a promise. That promise is being often realized with complexity and with additional system burden, more technical debt, so much technical debt you're accumulating that when it comes time to deliver those services back, you're not actually seeing a connected enterprise, net connected space. And the last piece is I want to talk a little bit about risk and compliance risk. There is, as you introduce new technologies and as you try and build new services, new service delivery models, you have a significant risk to falling out of compliance with regulatory obligations. When we surveyed companies, we surveyed them in some particular industries that we thought were interesting. Financial services and insurance, government, manufacturing, supply chain logistics. Some of those are very heavily regulated industries. And every time you introduce new technologies, lines of business don't necessarily see the whole picture when it comes to compliance. Governance and compliance governance risk and compliance is a big part of things. Also, when you take a look at other regulatory obligations, things like ESG that are coming into play more and more for organizations, these are things that are not being necessarily considered as you're introducing new technologies. This is all an unconnected space. And one of the key parts about making the sort of chaos of operations come into alignment, into order, is about a connected space. Connecting systems, connecting business and IT, connecting it with interconnectivity through all of the different things you build. And what that means is centralizing, or at least standardizing, your operational model and setting and maintaining a common language for communication. I've seen more companies who speak 4, 5, 10 different languages to each other than I do that speak 1 or 2. And that comes from a few different things: disconnected systems, disconnected methods of modeling, and disconnected ways of communicating data on performance. So the evidence is even presented in different ways. So they can't really make evidence-based decisions. They're making best practice or best guess-based decisions, explanation-based decision-making. I want evidence-based decision-making. In fact, not just our clients want evidence-based decision-making. They'll say it in their annual reports. They'll say it between each other. But living that reality is very hard to do, which is why you need a central source for information, a central way of processing that information. So process and task mining is a technology, but a practice around that for process and task mining, and a standard way of blueprinting and setting a future state. So from strategy to execution, blueprinted in a centralized space that allows you to bring people together for communication, bring information together to inform and power your decisions. The idea is a data is maybe king, but context is its crown, the organizational reality. And that's important to bring together. And then a mechanism of control. And that is the ability to execute on your blueprinting, operationalize your business processes, and then check back to validate that processes are being followed, either from an organization perspective, so making sure that their actual people are executing processes with operational compliance, or deployment validation to make sure that your processes are being automated in the way that you want them to be. And I got to tell you, that last part seems like a small piece of the puzzle, but the number of times I've gone into an implemented ERP and watched that the organization sort of in horror discovers the way that it was implemented, it's too many to count, because they don't understand what their processes are, and decisions are made at implementation time with no scope of control from a collective business push, a collective business requirements that is actually followed and then monitored for compliance. So this is something that is fixable. The chaos, I can tell you, it can be brought into order, but it takes, perhaps the most expensive word at all, discipline. And discipline is something you learn. It's not something you buy. Yes, you purchase technology, you purchase services to help you train discipline into your organization, but you earn discipline through setting up things like centers of excellence or even centers of just competency. You earn it through integrating technology approaches like a centralized database for process and architecture into your way of working. You earn it by effectively communicating wins with your various business teams, earning their buy-in or getting them through jealousy so they can come together and collaborate and help inform their business realities to give a collected picture of what the business actually does and the regression analysis of impact as change happens. You need a clarity of vision and thought, as well as the means to decisively act. That's what cuts through organizational chaos. That's what makes you competitive. That's what gives you the success for operational excellence. And that's what helps to keep you away from the issues of risk, issues of compliance, and issues of operational resilience. Another piece of this puzzle is a misconception that organizational chaos causes bottom line issues. As in, what you're trying to do when you look at reintegrating or redesigning architecture, processes, standardizing and controlling, managing with new automation or new technologies, new ways of working, is to make it more efficient to operate. Well, that's certainly something you can do, but remember that your gains from reducing the cost of operations, the most you can ever do is reduce it to a very bare minimum. It's not unbounded. You're not going to pay less than $0 to operate, right? So you only can save so much. I would say that when you standardize process, you bring it into a shared repository, you drive forward collaboration, you use process and task mining to understand things, you deploy and operate your processes, and you check back their efficacy. You actually give yourself the control, the scope of control and agility to be able to introduce new products and services faster. Now you have standards from which you can build. You're not going back every time and starting projects from zero. You're starting them from 60 to 80%. You have technology standards in place. You have process standards in place. You have shared services able to be accessed. You have a team that is equipped and that they're empowered to make meaningful but quick decisions. And then you can beat the market. You can deliver services better and faster to your customers, earning customer loyalty and buy-in, earning new customers and reducing churn. You can also beat the market as new product developments and new technologies are introduced. You're better prepared. You have a strong foundation upon which to launch early to the market and beat out competition. That's top-line growth. And process excellence, operational excellence is the core of beating the market and building a more successful and ever-growing top line to your business. That's necessary. And it feels like building the plumbing, but it's really hard to build beautiful new houses if no one has water. They're going to find out pretty quickly that doesn't work. So make sure your foundation is strong, that you have everything integrated tightly with each other with rock solid governance and control through a centralized platform, a centralized repository, a collective space for design, control, governance, rollout, and then build your dream mansion on top of it.
JM, thank you so much for taking time out today and of course talk about Software AG, the chaos of operations. Great insights there, and I would love to have you back on the show, but I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And you can, of course, go to softwareag.com to find out more information, or what I do specifically, go to eris.com. We are the best way I've ever found at addressing some serious organizational chaos with excellence in process. We have a passion for process. We'd love to share that with all of you.